The characteristics of the channels we have loaded are the default ones, meaning that both graphically and in terms of alarm settings, they are neutral. What we are going to do today instead is to carefully and thoughtfully customize the various characteristics, such as the specific color, the thickness of the lines, or other important graphical aspects, as well as the alarm or highlighting conditions for both scalars and analog signals, making sure that each setting is tailored to our needs. The channel attributes can be modified by first selecting them from the channel list, typically with a double click on the individual channel entry, which then opens up the attributes window for further adjustments, allowing you to make the necessary changes. Mainly, in the upper part of the display, the graphical characteristics are shown, those specific features that affect the overall visual or graphical appearance of the scope itself, while these here, in contrast, concern more the functioning and operation of the alarm features or the highlighting and emphasis in both the scalar and analog channels, respectively. For each individual channel, therefore, we can select, for example, the color as well as the thickness of the line with which it is displayed, the specific type of line depending on what we want to see, and also the maximum and minimum values, where the maximum represents the upper edge of the scope and the minimum represents the lower edge of the scope. Additionally, these settings allow for more precise customization, ensuring that each channel is displayed exactly as needed for our analysis. In this case, speaking about the TPS, we can, for example, set 110 as the upper value and -10 as the lower value to allow us to see the line even when the throttle is closed. The only display parameter that is shown at the bottom of the interface is the reference, which is essentially the option to apply a reference line, usually represented as a dashed line, to the scope section. This feature can be particularly useful for understanding and analyzing how the channel behaves, not only in terms of its minimum and maximum values, but also with respect to an intermediate parameter or value that may be of interest. In this case, having applied the attribute properties to the TPS, we can immediately see from the legend that the TPS has indeed turned red with a thick line, so thickness 5. And as you can clearly see, in addition, the display scale now goes from -10 to 110, and the reference is set at 50, just as specified in the attributes. One important thing to remember is that the attributes belong to the channel and not to the window. So everything we do in the channel is then reflected in the scope window or in the scalar or analog windows, depending on the characteristic. There is also a useful shortcut that provides quick access to the scope attributes through this icon, which is usually found in the main toolbar or interface of the application. By clicking on this icon, you can open a dedicated scope preferences window. In this window, the attributes of the channels that are currently present in the scope are carefully collected, organized, and summarized. This makes it easier to review and manage the various properties and settings associated with each channel, ensuring that all relevant information is conveniently available in one place for efficient adjustment and reference. This feature provides us with a significant advantage, as it enables us, for instance, to not only make modifications to specific aspects, but also to do so with greater speed and efficiency. By allowing us to quickly select and adjust the particular types of characteristics or properties that we wish to apply, we can tailor the settings to each individual channel within the scope. This means that instead of having to go through a lengthy process of changing settings one by one, we can streamline our workflow and ensure that each channel receives the precise adjustments it needs. As a result, our overall process becomes much more flexible and responsive to our specific requirements. As I showed you earlier, after changing the water temperature has become a thick blue line now. In this case, as mentioned earlier, the attributes belong to the channel and not to the window. If I open the list of channels in the tree, I find that what I set in the scope attributes is reflected. It has been copied, or in any case is part of the individual channel. So having modified the attributes of the water TPS, now let's see how the visualization appears with the new scope. As you can see, the TPS is very often red, the water is very often blue, but not as a solid line, rather as a dashed line. So as we've seen, we've modified the graphical properties of the scope. Now let's take a look at the properties of the channels in the scalar environment and in the analog environment. In this case, the attributes can, to access the channel attributes, I need to go through the tree with a double click. The graphical attributes window opens. In the list of 6 options we have below, we can instead specify the functions of highlighting from a table or scalar point of view. To make modifications to them, we need to choose the appropriate option if necessary. From the drop-down menu, we can define which type of option we want to activate. The reference applies only to the scope. For scalars, on the other hand, we have the option to highlight only the name, which means drawing attention specifically to the label or identifier of the scalar value, or to activate a warning. This warning takes the form of a yellow pre-alarm highlight, which serves as a visual cue to indicate that a certain parameter is approaching a critical value. In order to enable this feature, we need to set a specific condition that will trigger the warning, as well as define a threshold value for that condition to determine when the highlight should appear. So for example, if the water temperature is above, say, 90 degrees Fahrenheit, or in the case of an alarm condition where there is a danger threshold, once we have clearly and thoroughly defined this setting, we can then confidently confirm our choice. However, please note that it will only be displayed when I reactivate real time. So until then, the changes will not be visible. Once we have carefully confirmed the attributes, we can clearly see that the water temperature has the highlight attribute. This is evident since the background has now turned green, indicating the highlight status. By going to modify, in normal operation, the channel can change its value if required or necessary, and reach the thresholds that we have defined as alarms. And in this case, we see that the yellow warning is activated both as a yellow background on the scalar and as a yellow alarm for the analog function. When the pure alarm function is exceeded, the channel background turns red, indicating danger, and the alarm symbol also turns red, signaling danger. The alarm and danger conditions that are set in the dash do not interfere with the engine, as they are only graphical events. One last thing, a feature that a unique functionality that only the scalar window actually allows is the ability to reorder the sequence of channels in any order you wish, as you prefer. That is, you can load the channels you need into that window, giving you the flexibility to work with only the information that is most relevant to your current task. Later on, if you decide that the order of the channels is not the one in which you originally selected them, but rather the one that you find most convenient, you can easily rearrange them. For example, if you realize that a different sequence would make it easier to compare or monitor the channels, you can simply adjust their order to suit your preferences, ensuring that the interface remains convenient and efficient for your workflow.